Hello. I made gold in the last episode. In this episode we're going to make it so that these slimes can drop items, up to 3 different kinds of items, but in order to do that we need to create a few more kinds of items. So let's go ahead and create 2 duplicates of this, and one of these we'll call a green slime, and one of them we will call a small slime core. Easy enough, right? Of course, they need to have their sprites. I created a couple of sprites just for this purpose. So here is our slime thumbnail. And here is our slime core thumbnail. But of course, they don't actually exist here in the game. We can duplicate this and just drop them on these, like so. Where are you? Oh, down here. Okay. And so that doesn't look like green slime to me. Well, what I've done is the slime is gray, and that's because I can in fact specify a color for that image right here. And this means that I can just use the different kinds of not that image, sorry, this image. And that just means I can use the different kinds of slime. I can use one image for all of them, which is a cheap and dirty way to do it. Now obviously I'm against using palette swaps for important things, and we're going to get around to that eventually when I show you how to create monster variants. But for something like inventory item icons, I'm okay with it being types and colors. Something simple. I don't need everything to have its own specific icon. But I can't specify these colors, so there's a couple more details we're going to need here in our inventory item script. Grind, 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 grind. There we are. We're going to need a color. And we'll make it default to white. So here we are in our loot. Our green slime is not going to be that color. It's going to be kind of a yellowish green, like this. And our small slime core, we're going to make that a bluish green, like this. And we're going to go ahead and open up our inventory item display. And we are going to make it so that it sets the color correctly. Come on, spell things right, Craig. You'll notice that the gold is already gold. I can create different kinds of currency, but I'm going to stick with just gold. And so the green slime is green. And of course, if I change that out for some other target, like the small slime core, it will be blue. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make it so that these characters here drop those kinds of items. So there is one detail I'd like to change before we go any further, and that is the names of all of these things. This inventory item isn't named correctly. It really should be an inventory item template. For reasons that are kind of complicated, it makes more sense to call this a template, and that way we won't ever forget when we are using it. Over here in the inventory item display, this is just a display, but it's got the num stacked in it, so that would mean that it contains data. It's not just a display. So we're actually just going to rename this inventory item. And so what we've just done is we've just made this the inventory item, and then the inventory item template is below it. And that makes a lot more sense to me. But we do need to be a little bit careful because Unity will drop the ball here. And you can see that it forgot to fix these metas. It should be okay. Those should just correct themselves. But it would be nice if Unity could keep up with its own operations. Anyhow, in order to get those slimes to drop this stuff, we have the slime loot object, which is just this script here. And it says, well, here's the magnet range and blah, 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 blah. And right now all this does is home in on the player and deposit itself into the player's presence. What we need to do is we need to change it so that the loot actually contains some idea of what it should be. Now this is not a template. These loot items are in fact physical game objects in the scene. So the question is, what sort of inventory item are they actually going to have, and how many? We're going to make it so that each packet only contains one inventory item. So to deal with that, we'll just say public inventory item template, and public int num stacked equals 0. So that makes it very, very similar to the inventory item. And in fact, we could just say inventory item, except then we would have to have a sorts of display stuff built in, and I don't really care to do that. So this will work fine. And this should obviously be 1 by default. Anyhow, when we are going to be creating this loot, we are going to need to have a set of options that will allow us to spawn in loot with the correct things inside of it. Well, let's go over and look at a slime here. You can see that our slime does in fact have this treasure spawner script attached to it, which has a couple of things that we can add in. It's got this public loot treasure. Let's go ahead and rename this because it's not actually going to be treasure. That's going to be the loot bin fab, whatever you want to call it, just because we need to make the difference between the visual and the actual treasure. We're going to have to reassign that, I think. Yeah, so drag it back in. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a list of inventory items, inventory item templates that are allowable. Pretty straightforward, right? There is, however, one thing about this that we need to keep in mind. The inventory item templates have no concept of amount. They don't understand whether we're wanting to do 5 pieces of gold or 1 piece of gold. They don't have any concept of that. So we actually have to be able to specify the amount for the various inventory items we would like to spawn in. We have 2 basic options. One option is we can specify an amount for each individually. And that way each little packet could contain 3 or 4 pieces of slime. However, because we're dropping multiple bags, that's not very useful. We're dropping multiple bags, so if each bag only contains 1 item, that's fine, except if that item is gold, because that would mean that we would only be able to get a maximum of 3 gold out of any enemy that dropped 3 bags. So we do need to specify an amount of gold that is possible. So there we go. And so that's just for gold, and that's our other option, is to just specify it for gold, the one thing we actually might need to put more than one thing in. So here in the loot, we just want to specify what sort of treasure we're getting. So inventory item template T, we'll call it template, yeah, equals possible treasures, and then random.range 0, possible treasures dot length. There we go. And we'll say if template.name equals gold. First we need to assign it. So l.template equals template. And then down here we say if template.name equals gold, then l.numStacked equals random.range min gold max gold. Now I think that range is exclusive on the upper end, so this would actually not be max gold. This would be 1 higher than max gold. So if we specified 1 to 10, we'd never get 10. So we'll add 1 here. And that should do. That should make our loot little bins have what they need to have in them. Of course, we do need to specify what sort of objects we would like to spawn in, because right now the possible treasures are empty. So let's go over here into loot, and let's go ahead and lock this. And then we'll just select these and drop them in. Possible treasures are not taking. That's interesting. Why aren't you... Sorry, I seem to have coughing fits all of a sudden. Inventory item template possible treasures. Oh. Fucking brilliant. So these are not lost to time, I think. I think all we have to do is make sure that these scripts come back to us, and I think we can do that by dropping the correct script in. Inventory item template is here. Drop it in, and then we'll just go ahead and see whether or not we kept the values. Yes, we did. Good. So that will happen when you rename things, because these are these script pointers are actually for some reason they actually use the string value of the class. Well, that's okay. We caught it, and we didn't do any damage to these because the arguments are also stored as strings. So, you know, it worked out. But let's go ahead and try that again. Let's slime here. And I guess we'll just drag them in one at a time. Possible treasures. All of these are possible. Now, if we wanted to make some of these more likely than others, we would just put them in again. This is not a you know, there are more efficient ways to do that, but each one of these is just an integer, so having a list of 5 integer values is insignificant. There's no real worries about that. And I think that 10 gold is a bit much. Let's say 5 gold maximum. And then we'll save it like this, and we'll go just check the other slimes and make sure it's saved properly. Yep. So now when we hit play, let's go ahead and kill a slime. Whack. Whack. Wham. And wham. Now, a treasure will pop out, and we'll go over and take a look at that treasure. Where is our treasure? So here's our loot, and you can see that the template is a small slime with a num stacked of 1. And here we have loot with a... Oh, that's not the loot, that's the sack. There we are. Loot with a green slime in it, and loot with a small slime in it. So we didn't get any gold out of that guy. But of course, if we walk over to it, it just says got loot. It doesn't say what the loot was. It doesn't add it to our inventory. The good news is that's actually pretty easy to do. The bad news is it's been 12 minutes, and it's going to take at least 5. I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'll make this episode a little bit long, but it is better than just accomplishing nothing. So over here in our loot, we say destroy game object, message got loot. This is where we're going to start to change our techniques. Instead of saying got loot, we're going to say got. First we'll need to check and see if num stacked equals 1. We'll say got, and then we will give the name of the inventory item template. Otherwise, we have to say how many we got. There we go. And now that will give us the item over in our window, but it won't actually give us the inventory. We need to put it in our inventory. How do we do that? Well, we need to get the inventory. If we look at the player, we can see that there is no concept of the inventory attached to the player. That's because right now the inventory is out here on this canvas. It's this canvas object floating in space. And that's not necessarily bad, as long as our inventory can be reached. Well, it can't be reached from our player, so we need to have some other way to reach it, and we're going to go ahead and just make it so that there is a static inventory that we keep track of. Since we're not planning on switching inventories, we're only going to have one base party inventory, this will work fine. Sorry, why did I put an equal sign there? And then in awake, we say active inventory equals this. Easy as pie. And here in our loot, we say inventory.active inventory. Oh, there is no add item option. Well, let's go ahead and pretend that there is one. We're going to pass it the template and the num stacked. Then we'll destroy the game object. Of course, we do need to create this add item function. Oh, we should make it a bool, because later on we'll be using this to put in quest items and stuff, and in those cases we'll want to double check and make sure that there is, in fact, no error. Add item, inventory item template, and number, which would have to be an int. Now that's all well and good, except the inventory as it's programmed has no concept of those inventory items that we've been putting in so rashly and so quickly. We need to actually have our inventory items as things we can spawn and keep track of. Okay, we're going to need to have another naming space here, generic, and that's because we're going to be using some lists. Let's go ahead and add them in, shall we? Public list inventory item, inventory, and public inventory item, inventory item fab. Simple enough. Let's go ahead and hide this in the inspector. The reason for that is that we don't want to allow people to put things in the player's inventory on accident. You know what? Let's go ahead and leave it. I might actually want to put things in the player's inventory on purpose, so... No, wait. Yeah, that's fine. We'll leave it like that. Sorry, I'm thinking too far ahead and I'm confusing myself. A while back I was asked, a while back meaning yesterday, I was asked if, when I say, you know, we can do things the easy way right now, we'll do things the hard way later, why I never taught the correct way. And the reason is because the correct way doesn't really work until you know exactly what you need. So usually I implement something easy and transparent until I get far along enough to know what I'm actually looking to do. And in this case, what we're going to start with is gold. And we're going to leave the gold in the inventory. We're going to start with some amount of gold, and then all of the other ones will spawn in as we need them. But we do need to drop this into the prefabs list. There we go. I wonder why it's not blue. That's a little creepy. It's probably because there's an error in the code and that's screwing everything up. So we don't return any Boolean values, of course. What we need to do here is pan through all of our inventory objects, and if there is one, just add in the number stacked if it's stackable, and otherwise create one. So for int a equals 0, a is less than inventory.count a plus plus. You could also do a for each here. I don't see any particular problems with it in this case. Inventory a, if inventory a.template dot item. I'm calling it item. Okay. That item equals template. And template dot stackable. Inventory a dot numstacked plus equals numstacked. That's easy enough, but we do have to tell it to reload. Inventory a dot setup. Well, we should probably just make a better function for that. Oh, we'll just use setup. It doesn't really matter. Setup is kind of, we're going through a little bit of extra work that we don't need to by resetting it up every time, because it's going to reset the color and the little thumbnail and all that stuff, but who cares? And then at the end of that we just return true because we are done. So down here, this means that we haven't found it or it's not stackable. We'll go ahead and just add it in as a new inventory item. So we will say inventory item new item equals inventory item, come on, instantiate inventory item fab. That's all correct, right? There we are. Now where do we put it? We have to put it inside of the inventory item. Well, fortunately we are the inventory item. So new item dot transform dot set parent this dot transform, or just plain old transform, your choice, and false because we don't want to keep the world position. And that should work it into our correct location, and all we have to do is new item dot setup template new item dot numstacked equals numstacked, and we should do this first, and add it to the inventory. There we are. That should do, don't you think? Now later on we'll probably have to change it so that the inventory and the inventory item displays are not the same, but for now that should work fine. Let's go ahead and take a look at the missing reference. Alright, that's probably just because when we changed it a while ago I forgot to change it back. No script. Oh, because I did change it, yeah. So we have to put this. Yep, just forgot to fix it, that's fine. And again, all of these pop right back into existence. Let's go ahead and start ourselves off with 50 gold. That seems to be a common amount of gold to start with. So we've got 50 gold. Let's go ahead and collect some more loot. Let's actually hit them. That is part of the plan here. If you don't actually hit them, you're not going to get very much gold out of them. Alright, Pinata. What did I get? I got lots of gold. Let's try that again here. Oh, of course, I forgot to actually set it up to have a link to the inventory. I'm really, really bad these days at remembering to fill in all of these pieces. I'm sorry if this has been confusing at all. Oh, of course, the inventory item didn't save properly because it doesn't have the proper script. So, apply. Now it's blue. Everything's good. I knew that it wasn't blue for a reason. Yep, good. Everything's good. Everything's working fine. Just add it in here. And hit play. Alright, one more time. Yay! And you can see that our gold actually ended up repeating. I'm not sure why that is, but the slime didn't, and so I have a feeling that there might be something wrong with the... Oh, of course, the very, very first gold isn't actually in the list. See? There we are. That'll do. The inventory didn't know that it had a gold stack already in play. Gotta fill this stuff in. I feel that this has been a confusing episode, largely because I changed some of the names partway through, and that ended up taking a whole bunch of scripts off. And it would have been best if that hadn't happened. Perfect. So if you feel confused, most of the errors that were caused in this episode, most of the confusing excuse me, aside from the hiccups, most of the confusing parts in this episode were because I ended up desyncing all of the prefabs that had inventory items or inventory item visuals or inventory item templates. I ended up desyncing all of that stuff on accident. Don't worry, you probably won't end up doing that. But if you do, just keep in mind that these sorts of bugs happen, and they can be fixed usually by just tracking down all of the desynced instances. Now, things like me forgetting to put inventory items into the inventory list, that's just me being an idiot. So, what's our total haul today? We got 16 gold, 9 green slimes, and 3 small slime cores. I call that a nice little fight. Let's leave it off here, and in the next episode we'll do something more.